Sitting across from the corporate executive whose narrow eyes were scanning my credentials, I could feel the cold prickle of sweat pooling along my collarbone. For 15 years I had poured every waking hour into building regional supply networks and quadrupling revenues across international borders, only to have my life work swept off the desk like trash. The woman tapped her gold pen against my paper with a sneer, casually declaring that my track record looked completely fabricated for someone without an Ivy League pedigree. My bank account was almost depleted, my pride was utterly shattered, and after 8 grueling months of endless rejections, I was sitting through my 73rd interview just watching another gatekeeper erase my entire identity. My name is Kendra Lawson, and at 42 years old, I found myself fighting for my professional life in a polished glass office building downtown. Growing up in a forgotten Rust Belt town where women were expected to take retail jobs and settle down early, I had worked double shifts at a local diner just to fund my business degree. I possessed a sharp analytical mind and an instinct for reading consumer psychology that allowed me to spot hidden market patterns others completely missed. But none of that mattered to Deborah Vance, the cold chief talent officer who was currently treating me like a criminal trying to sneak past security. She sat back, folded her hands, and smugly suggested that my achievements belonged to someone else. The humiliation was unbearable, especially knowing why I was actually sitting in that chair to begin with. 8 months prior, I was heading international strategy at a major firm when a private equity group bought us out. Within weeks, the new male leadership systematically cleared out every experienced female director to make room for their former college fraternity brothers. They handed me a quiet severance package and showed me the door, assuming I would simply disappear. Instead, I spent the next 200 days getting passed over by recruiters who could not reconcile my massive achievements with their narrow expectations. Just as Deborah was preparing to deliver another scripted rejection, the heavy oak door to her office suddenly swung wide open. A well-dressed man walked into the room carrying a leather portfolio, stopped dead in his tracks, and stared directly at me with absolute disbelief. His face lit up with genuine relief as he called out my name, identifying me as the genius consultant who single-handedly saved his flagship division from bankruptcy the previous winter. Deborah sat frozen in her seat as Arthur Pendleton, the CEO of the most lucrative consumer brand on their client list, walked over to shake my hand. He loudly informed the room that my precise strategic overhaul had saved his enterprise millions of dollars. He then turned to Deborah and demanded to know if I was heading their account, stating that my involvement was the only condition for renewing his contract. The atmospheric shift in that room was instantaneous and almost sickening to witness. The moment Arthur walked back down the hall, Deborah straightened her posture, softened her tone, and began speaking to me as if we were lifelong friends. She scribbled frantic notes on her pad, suddenly offering me a senior director role with a compensation package nearly double the original baseline. Watching her rewrite our shared reality in real time gave me emotional vertigo. 10 minutes ago she had practically called me a fraud, but now she was praising my rare vision and executive presence. I looked at her false smile, collected my folders from her desk, and calmly stated that I needed the weekend to consider her sudden change of heart. That Sunday morning, I met my longtime colleague Valerie at a quiet neighborhood diner to discuss the unexpected offer letter sitting in my bag. At 58, Valerie was a brilliant data analyst who had also been pushed out during the corporate merger, and she possessed a fierce wisdom that I deeply respected. As I recounted Deborah's behavior, Valerie shook her head and pointed out that joining that firm would mean constantly depending on male clients to validate my worth. She then leaned across the table and proposed something bold, suggesting that we pool our remaining funds together to launch an independent consultancy. We could recruit our old team and build a firm that measured talent by actual performance rather than corporate politics. A surge of genuine purpose washed over me for the first time in nearly a year as we drafted the foundation of Vanguard Insights. We brought in our former digital director and spent the next 6 months working out of a converted garage, burning through our savings to build a proprietary analytical framework. We focused on emerging markets that traditional firms routinely ignored, using local cultural data rather than rigid Western economics. Our first break came when a regional director trusted us with a struggling product line, and our unique strategy generated a 40% growth spike in 3 months. Word spread quickly through the industry, and before long our small garage operation was taking phone calls from major national accounts. Our defining moment arrived at the annual industry summit, where we had managed to secure a minor speaking slot on the secondary stage. I presented our data models to a packed room, demonstrating how traditional corporate hiring and market assessments systematically overlooked incredible value. Right in the middle of the open Q&A session, Arthur Pendleton stood up from the middle row and confirmed our results to the entire audience. He announced right then and there that he was pulling his multi-million-dollar account from Deborah firm and transferring his entire business to Vanguard. Across the auditorium, I caught sight of Deborah and her chief executive watching in absolute terror as their largest revenue source publicly walked away. After the panel concluded, the chief executive of Deborah firm cornered me near the lobby, offering an awkward apology for how my initial interview had been handled. He practically begged us to consider a strategic partnership, but I politely declined, knowing that my team was already building something far greater than his legacy model. Over the next year, Vanguard expanded into a pristine downtown office, hiring brilliant strategists who had been previously rejected by traditional corporate gatekeepers. We implemented a blind skills assessment process that identified raw genius regardless of background or pedigree. Our unconventional team consistently outperformed every major firm in the city, turning our small startup into a dominant industry force that could no longer be ignored. The final reckoning came 14 months later when Deborah firm formally requested a meeting to discuss an acquisition. Walking back into their executive boardroom alongside my legal team, I watched Deborah sit quietly across from me, her former arrogance completely replaced by visible anxiety. Their executive board offered tens of millions to acquire our methodologies, but I laid down strict, non-negotiable conditions. I demanded complete operational independence and full executive authority to restructure their entire recruitment network using our inclusive evaluation standards. When Deborah attempted to argue that my terms dismantled their traditional standards, I looked her in the eye and reminded her that those exact standards had caused them to dismiss the very strategist now deciding their fate. Their board accepted our terms 3 days later, cementing a complete transformation of their organizational structure. On my first day taking over their operations, Deborah walked into my new office to hand over her transfer papers, quietly admitting that she had re-evaluated hundreds of candidates she had previously dismissed over her long career. She acknowledged that her rigid bias had blinded her to true capability, admitting that my framework had forever changed how she viewed human potential. Before I reveal the final moment of this journey, I would love to connect with all of you tuning in today. Take a quick second to leave a comment down below and tell me which country or city you are watching this video from right now. Knowing where our amazing global community comes from inspires us to keep bringing you these incredible stories of transformation and strength. Standing before 300 employees during the company-wide address later that afternoon, I realized that true satisfaction was never about humiliating the people who doubted me. It was about dismantling the invisible walls that keep capable people from proving their worth to the world.